Hello, this is James Kelly with response video number 2. A little late because laptop issues. First we start with chapter 4. At the start of chapter 4, we are first introduced to Pierre Galutier, something something, can't spell all the rest of his name is too long. A fur trader who kept journals of his journey into the West Canada, exploring territories inhabited by the Mandan people. These journals captured native inland sea before 1753 and the 7 Years' War between France and Britain. But before we get more into, before like Pierre, there was also more stuff going on with the Iroquois. They had secured independence in agreement with the English officials, maintaining control over a network of villages across the Ohio River. Both the British and the French feared the power would both feared either power would ally with the Iroquois, so that kind of led to some conflict. While this was happening in New France, tensions grew over trade and some conflicts arose that needed mediation. We also are introduced to Jesuit missionaries known as the Black Robes, who played a dual role as like religious people and also historians in France, New France. I find that kind of weird that they're historians because I feel like their religion could sway how they tell history just because maybe something doesn't go the way they kind of like it, and they're like, we're gonna change that. We're gonna not tell it that way. After this, we are reintroduced to some already covered topics such as natives using European weapons, enslavement, and inter-tribe conflicts. But we are also introduced to topics not covered yet, such as indigenous acceptance of two-spirit identities and same-sex relationships that sparked both interest and scorn in the French. I also find this kind of weird because, not weird, but just like interesting because I always think of Native American having very Native American culture having very distinct roles, like the men do this and the women do this. So the fact they're very understanding, more understanding at this point than Europeans of like what they call multi two spirit identities or even same sex relationships is very interesting to me. Um, from past French and British conflicts, King. Oh, okay. I don't know how I wrote this, but first, and then we get into the King George's War, where France and England came to conflict. This impacted trade in North America as British blockades closed ports. So French leaders sought to strengthen alliances with native groups, bringing leaders from multiple native nations to Paris for talks. In 19 why did I say 19? In 1745, British forces captured the fortress of Louisbourg, forcing native traders to turn to the British for supplies. In May 1754, tensions escalated into war when young George Washington, along with Seneca leader Tana Grayson, ambushed French troops near Fort Duquesne. Initially, French victories were reversed by British reinforcements, who by 1760 had seized control of the Ohio River Valley and forced French surrender. Then, by 1763, the Treaty of Paris was ratified, ending France's territorial claims in North America, dissolving New France, and with the French gone, tribes cannot do trade with them anymore, so they would have to work more collaboratively with the British. At the end of the war also brought British colonies together. The colonies could not manage Indian affairs individually. That was about the end of chapter 4. Now we get into chapter 5. With the end of the war in 1763, British colonists started to seek land expansion, while indigenous groups like Odawa and Potawatomi hoped to maintain autonomy and trade. Later in 1763, inspired by Neolin, a Lenape prophet who rejected British rule, Pontiac, an Odawa war chief, led a revolt, destroying 9 British forts and pushing settlers out. British forces, led by Lord Amherst, responded violently, using tactics like smallpox infected blankets. The rebellion ended with a stalemate and a peace treaty. Then comes the Royal Proclamation, which regulates trade and sets boundaries between settlers and indigenous lands. That angers these settlers that wanted a bunch of land, so they're like, "What the hell? Why can't we get this land? We just took it all from the French. Let us have it." This anger leads to extreme situations such as the Conestoga massacre, where settler vigilantes known as the Paxton Boys massacred massacred huge amounts of natives, fueling racial violence. Then the Paxton Boys planned to attack Philadelphia, were stopped by Benjamin Franklin. Though these crisis was avoided, resentment against the government grows because they kind of stopped them. And I had never heard of these events before learning of this, so it's kind of crazy to me that this was happening. Like, I guess I don't know. I just expected people to be nicer. I don't know. And it's also just never knew there was such extreme hate for the natives at this time. After this, in 1765, diplomatic negotiations between Pontiac and British commander Colonel George Croghan brought an end to the war, but groups such as the Black Boys that opposed native peace took extreme measures to try and stop this like peace agreements, such as like dressing up as natives and doing stuff to the British, which is kind of crazy to me. It's like, oh yeah, we don't want to be peaceful. We're gonna make the British think natives destroyed stuff, which is kind of crazy to me. Okay, that was pretty much. Oh yeah. Then these black boy leaders like James Smith and John Moore later represented Western Pennsylvania in the Constitutional Convention, and they were like pretty much invited by like Benjamin Franklin and stuff and everybody else. And it's kind of crazy to me that people that are kind of like, I mean, they were against the British, so they probably liked them because of that. But I also feel like, yeah, but they're also like super racist. But I guess everybody else was. I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of crazy, a little bit too crazy to be part of a government. Now in that was the end of chapter 5, and now in chapter 6, we cover more the American relationship with the natives, no more the British. Starting with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, recognized in 1863. I don't know why I wrote that. Recognizing the independence of the United States, but the original government, the Articles of Confederation, did not do well and eventually abandoned, and new government formed in the Constitutional Convention in 1783-87. But post 18 why am I saying 1863? Post 1863, thousands of British allied Cherokee, Creek, and Iroquois faced devastation. Villages are destroyed and crops are burned. Congress established the Ohio River as a boundary between the U.S. and native territories, but the American government still struggles to manage its borders. In this new world, Americans saw Western lands as like a symbol for opportunity and prosperity, and they wanted to just take all the property. So settlers moved into areas like Western Virginia and Kentucky, disrupting native economies and pushing indigenous groups like way too north. Although the federal government was given authority over trade and native nations, expansion remained chaotic, with settlers raiding native lands. Some state leaders even offered bounties for scalps and body parts of natives, which I find is completely crazy because it's like government. You're telling people to murder each other. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude, come on. Rivalry between states over Western lands also became a big issue under the Articles of Confederation. Some people thought that only the federal government should handle these land transfers, while others believed states should have that power. This led to states taking native lands for themselves, ignoring federal agreements, and weakening both national authority and native rights. And then finally, the new Constitution made a powerful national government, clarifying the jurisdictions the state and the federal government had. The Constitution excluded natives from Congress completely and basically said, like, basically classified them as separate from both state and foreign nations. This distinction, along with centralized military control, furthered the process of land dispossession for Native Americans. So more land was basically taken. And that is it. Thank you. A little shorter. Only a minute, though.